She walked right past the table I set. Forks aligned. Wine breathing. Her favorite napkins, the ones with the embroidered corners she claimed reminded her of dinners that matter. Nothing. Not a glance. Not even a fake apology. She tossed her keys into the bowl, kicked off her heels, and mumbled something that sounded like "Granger says hi," as if that meant anything to me. I didn't move. I just watched her walk into the other room, still laughing at whatever was in her phone, probably one of those inside jokes I stopped being included in 3 months ago. Or maybe 4. Who's counting? The candles flickered. The pasta cooled. I sat down and ate alone, careful not to make chewing noises that might irritate her if she happened to walk back in. She didn't. Instead, the sound that followed was her closing the bedroom door. Click. No lock. Just emphasis. I counted to 60 in my head, stood up, opened my laptop, and pulled up the email I never thought I'd send. It was already drafted. All I had to do was hit send. Subject line: invitation, Saturday night. Bring him. No tricks. Just us. The recipient? My wife. And her boss. I sent it. Then I stood up, walked to the mirror in the hallway, and stared at myself for what felt like 20 minutes. It wasn't anger. It wasn't heartbreak. It was something softer. Something embarrassing. Like the moment you realize everyone stopped listening to your stories a long time ago, and you were too dense to notice. She didn't reply that night, but I knew she read it. How? Because the next morning, her toothbrush was gone, but not her silence. That came with her on Saturday, when they showed up at my door. Together, holding hands, smiling like they were walking into a brunch, not a trap. And not one of them realized what was already waiting for them inside. When I opened the door that Saturday evening, I expected hesitation. I expected maybe a pause, a second of discomfort, or even a fake excuse. But what I got was worse, complete ease. Lainey was dressed like she hadn't given the moment a single ounce of thought. Her hair was up in one of those loose knots that made her look accidentally perfect. And beside her was Granger Falk in a cream button-down, sleeves casually rolled up, one hand in his pocket like this was just another networking dinner. He had the kind of face that was born smug, that practiced kind of handsome, built for courtroom victories and smirks at waiters. Lainey spoke first. "This is unexpected. You actually set a table." "I did," I said, motioning them in. "And you actually brought him." Granger extended his hand like we were fraternity brothers who hadn't seen each other in years. I didn't take it. Instead, I led them to the dining room, where 3 chairs waited. Not 2, not 4, just 3. I saw her glance at the middle one. It had a small white envelope taped underneath the seat. I doubted she noticed. "Not yet. I hope you're both hungry," I said, trying to sound upbeat. But I knew my voice had the same paper-thin stretch as every awkward holiday meal we'd sat through in silence these past few months. Still, I poured the wine and plated the food. No one touched it. Granger cleared his throat. "So, Wendell, this was your idea." "Sure was. And you wanted us both here. Together." "Exactly." Lainey's eyes narrowed. She knew me too well. She knew I wasn't impulsive, wasn't confrontational, wasn't someone who threw wild cards across the table. And yet, here I was. Not shouting. Not breaking things. Just smiling. And that, I think, made her more nervous than anything else I could have done. I handed them each a folded card, plain white, sealed. Lainey hesitated. Granger opened his first. Inside was a photo. Not a threatening one. Not scandalous. Just a single image I took from across the street 2 weeks ago. The two of them sitting on a bench outside a cafe, laughing, her hand on his arm. The same bench she and I sat on after we signed the lease to our first apartment. The one she claimed was our lucky spot. I guess the luck had shifted. They both looked up at me, speechless. I said nothing. I wanted the silence to grow legs. I wanted it to crawl under their skin. Lainey finally spoke. "What is this supposed to mean?" "I guess that depends," I said, standing and walking over to the wall, tapping the light switch so the room dimmed. "On whether either of you have anything real to say to me." Granger let out a small laugh, like he couldn't quite believe I was being serious. That's when I pulled out the second envelope. I slid it across the table toward Lainey. This one wasn't sealed. She opened it slowly. It wasn't more photos. It was a single printed page. A calendar invite, with dates and locations. All of them matched entries from her work planner. Except this version had details she hadn't included in hers, like room numbers, or flight confirmations, or the name of a spa in Scottsdale where they apparently ran into each other last month while she was at a leadership retreat. I waited again. Still silence. Until finally, she whispered, "How long have you known?" I sat back in my chair, folded my hands in my lap, and said quietly, "Long enough to stop asking for the truth." She flinched. A small one. But I saw it. Granger, on the other hand, leaned forward. "All right. You brought us here. You've got your receipts. Now what, Wendell?" And that's when I smiled. Because that was the part no one saw coming. Not even me, at first. Because what they didn't know, yet, was that we weren't alone in the house. Not tonight. Lainey shifted in her seat, finally starting to sense that something was wrong, not just in the way I spoke, but in the space itself. Granger, oblivious as ever, sipped the wine I poured and looked around like he was assessing the resale value of my furniture. But Lainey kept glancing at the hallway behind me. Something about the air had changed, like she felt a current she couldn't explain. I stood up slowly, walked around the table, and stopped behind her. "You don't remember this chair, do you?" I asked. She frowned. I tapped the backrest. "It's from your grandmother's place. The old dining set. You wanted to throw it out after she passed. But I kept one. Just one. Because she told me something before she died." Lainey's face went pale. She didn't speak, but her lips parted slightly, like she'd forgotten how to breathe. I bent down, reached under the seat, and ripped off the white envelope she hadn't noticed before. I handed it to her. She didn't open it. She just stared at it, like it might burn her fingers. Granger rolled his eyes. "This is all very poetic, Wendell, but are we building to something or just playing house?" I turned to him, not with anger, but with something worse, complete calm. "You ever been followed, Granger?" That hit. He blinked. The wine glass trembled slightly as he set it down. I didn't have to say more. The envelope in Lainey's hands said it all. Inside were photos, audio transcripts, and one tiny USB drive labeled simply, May 3rd, room 419. No lawyers. No threats. Just evidence. But the real surprise wasn't what was in the envelope. It was who helped me get it. The moment I said those words, "You ever been followed?" the door down the hallway creaked open. Light footsteps echoed toward the dining room. Granger straightened up in his seat, confused. Lainey's head turned slowly, dread forming like condensation on glass. And then she appeared. Tall. Poised. Hair like a blade of gold. The very last person either of them expected to see. Kimber Whitlow. Granger's wife. I'd met her once, years ago, at a corporate holiday party Lainey dragged me to. She wore a sapphire dress and a bored expression. I remember thinking she looked like the type of woman who could make a grown man feel 10 inches tall with a single glance. Tonight, she didn't need to say a word. Her presence said enough. Lainey stood up immediately, knocking over her wine glass, stammering. What is she doing here?" Granger was silent, mouth open, blinking like he'd suddenly forgotten how to form sentences. Kimber pulled out the third chair and sat down, slowly, gracefully, then folded her hands on the table like this was a board meeting. "I asked her to join," I said, walking back around the table. "Since you've both shared so much behind closed doors, I figured we'd all benefit from a little transparency." Granger looked like he might bolt for the door, but Kimber's presence nailed him to his seat. She reached into her clutch and pulled out her own envelope. She pushed it across the table toward him. It was thicker than mine. Lainey sat back down, visibly shaken. Her fingers trembled as she touched the edges of her envelope, still unopened. Her eyes darted from me to Kimber, then back again. "I don't understand," she whispered. "How did you two even?" Kimber finally spoke. Her voice was low, sharp, precise. "Lainey, I've known for months, and I've been waiting for Granger to come clean. I thought he might have the decency to end this before it unraveled like this. But apparently, decency is just another thing he delegates." Granger opened his mouth to speak, but Kimber lifted one hand. Just a single, elegant gesture, and he stopped. I didn't say anything for a long moment. I let it sit, let it rot. Then I looked directly at Lainey. "I wasn't planning to do any of this. But you ignored every sign, every attempt to talk. Every night I sat in that living room watching you type his name into your phone like it was second nature. Like I wasn't sitting 3 feet away." Lainey looked like she might cry, not out of guilt, but out of exposure. I didn't care anymore. The room went still. Then Kimber stood up, looked at me, and said, "I'll handle him." And as they turned to leave, Granger stammering, Kimber pulling him by the wrist, Lainey grabbed my arm and whispered, "What now?" I pulled my hand away and answered, "Now? Now you open the second envelope I left in the bedroom." Her eyes widened. "What second envelope?" But I was already walking away. I didn't need to watch her open it. I already knew what it said. She didn't follow me right away. I think she sat there for a while, in the aftermath of that awkward silence, trying to make sense of the ruins. Maybe she even convinced herself that I was bluffing, that I hadn't actually left another envelope, that I was just being theatrical. It wouldn't have been the first time she underestimated me. But about 10 minutes later, I heard her footsteps. Light, hesitant, like she wasn't sure she wanted the answer. She moved through the hallway, creaking the bedroom door open, slow enough that I could hear it from the living room where I now sat. Not doing anything dramatic, just folding laundry. Socks, shirts, the same beige towel that always smells faintly of her perfume no matter how many times I wash it. Then silence again. The kind that presses into your ears until your own heartbeat sounds like thunder. I didn't need to go check. I could picture her standing there by the bed, holding the soft gray envelope I had taped to the top drawer of her nightstand. The one drawer I knew she'd ignore until she was truly desperate for answers. Or reassurance. Inside the envelope wasn't a speech. Not a rant. Not even more evidence. It was a letter. Handwritten. Just 3 short paragraphs that I had rewritten and rewritten until it no longer sounded like begging. You win. You've spent more time making this relationship look good on the outside than actually living in it. You've mastered the art of appearances, and I'm done being the backdrop to your curated life. I didn't bring Kimber here tonight to shame you. I brought her to set you free. You already walked out of this marriage months ago, piece by piece. I just turned the lights on. By the time you read this, I'll be gone. Not dramatically, not in anger, just finally and fully gone. I left it and signed. She would recognize the handwriting. Back in the living room, I reached for the remote and muted the TV. There was nothing I wanted to watch. I just needed the illusion of normalcy while I waited. About 5 minutes later, I heard her voice from the hallway. Tight. Controlled. You think this is noble? She asked. I didn't answer. She appeared in the doorway like a ghost in daylight, makeup smudged, holding the open envelope like it was a contract she never agreed to. You think leaving me a note makes you some tragic hero? You blindsided me in front of him. In front of her. You orchestrated this entire ambush. I looked at her. Not coldly. Not cruelly. Just directly. You think I blindsided you? I said quietly. Lainey, you've been erasing me one notification at a time. You stopped talking to me, but you never stopped talking about him. I know the sound of his name better than the sound of my own. She didn't respond. Her chest rose and fell like she was trying to hold in a scream or a sob or both. I don't hate you. I continued. That's the worst part. If I hated you, this would be easier. I could rage and break something. But I don't. I just feel invisible. Lainey crossed her arms. So you're just going to disappear? After setting this circus on fire? No, I said, standing. I already disappeared. You just didn't notice until someone else finally walked away first. There was a long pause. And then she said the one thing I didn't expect. The one thing that stopped me cold. I didn't sleep with him. I blinked. You didn't. No, she said. Not that it matters now. I laughed once, short and bitter. No, I guess it doesn't. And that was the cruelest truth of all. It didn't. Whether she had or hadn't, I had still lost her somewhere along the way. Not to Granger, not to anyone else. I'd lost her to the version of herself that didn't need me anymore. That didn't even see me anymore. She stepped forward, voice shaking. You blindsided me, she repeated, softer now. You planned this whole night behind my back. I looked down. You planned a new life behind mine. And with that, I picked up my keys, walked past her, and left the house. I didn't slam the door. I didn't take anything except a small overnight bag I packed 3 days ago, just in case I got brave. I didn't know where I was going yet, but I knew this. Anywhere was better than where I had been, next to someone who hadn't looked at me like a person in months. I ended up at a motel 3 towns over. One of those places where the vending machines still take quarters and the ice bucket is made of chipped plastic. The kind of place that smells like bleach and the regrets of people who needed to disappear for a night. It felt appropriate. I didn't cry. I thought I would. I thought walking out of that house, our house, would collapse me. But instead, I just sat on the edge of the bed with the TV off and the curtains shut, listening to the soft hum of the air conditioner, and felt a strange weightlessness. Like I'd been carrying a backpack filled with wet cement for years, and I'd finally set it down without realizing how heavy it had gotten. It wasn't freedom. Not yet. But it was the first time I'd heard my own thoughts in months without them echoing back in her voice. Around 10:17 p.m., my phone buzzed. One message. Lainey, why am? No, I'm sorry. No, come home. Just those two words. I didn't reply. I stared at the screen until it dimmed, then powered the phone off completely. I didn't trust myself not to say something I'd regret. Or worse, something that would invite her back into my mind. That night, I slept in full clothes on top of the covers, shoes still on. I didn't mean to. I think my body just shut off. When I woke up the next morning, it was 6:48 a.m. I sat up slowly, unsure whether I felt relief or loss. Probably both. My stomach hurt, not from hunger, but from the knot of what came next. Because even though I had walked away, I wasn't done. There were things I still had to untangle. Shared accounts, bills, the lease. And the hardest one, the friends who never noticed, or worse, pretended not to. Before I left the motel, I opened the small bag I had brought with me. Inside was one thing I hadn't expected to take but did at the last second, the photo strip of us at the pier 5 years ago. For shots, smiling, goofy, her kissing my cheek, me laughing like an idiot. I stared at it for a full minute. It felt like a relic from a version of us that only existed in a parallel timeline. One where she came home at dinner. One where I didn't have to remind her who I was. One where Granger Falk was just a name on a business card, not the ghost between us. I almost threw the photo away. But instead, I folded it in half and placed it in my wallet, not because I wanted to hold on to her, but because I needed to remember who I used to be in that picture. Before everything blurred. By mid-morning, I checked into a small Airbnb closer to downtown, something with light, space, and no memories. The host's name was Bernice. She left a handwritten welcome note and a muffin in a Ziploc bag. I nearly cried over that muffin. It's amazing what small kindness does to someone who's been starved of it. Around noon, Kimber texted me. Kimber, he moved out this morning. Silent as ever. I'm not surprised. You okay? I wasn't. But I told her I was. Me, not okay. But not disappearing anymore. She didn't respond. She just sent a thumbs up. It felt more sincere than anything Lainey had said in 6 months. The following days were blurry. I went to work, quietly. I handled what needed to be handled. I moved money out of our shared checking, closed the streaming accounts, unsubscribed from the monthly coffee club she signed us up for without asking. She didn't fight it. I think she knew this wasn't about punishment. It was about release. But on the 4th night, as I was brushing my teeth in the guest bathroom of Bernice's sunny little apartment, I got a knock on the door. Not the front door. The bathroom door. I froze, toothbrush still in my mouth. Then I realized the knock had come from my phone buzzing violently on the sink counter. Someone was calling. Unknown number. I answered, foamy-mouthed, annoyed. A familiar voice whispered, Wendell, it's me. Please. I need to see you. I found something. You're not going to believe this. It was Lainey, and she sounded terrified. Not regretful. Not guilty. Terrified. For a full 10 seconds, I didn't say anything. I stood there in that quiet bathroom, electric toothbrush buzzing in my hand, toothpaste foaming at the corners of my lips, staring at the screen like it might explain itself. I hadn't heard that tone in her voice since the day her father had a stroke, hushed, panicked, desperate. Not manipulative. Not performative. Real. But I didn't trust that instinct anymore. She'd spent too many months training me to second-guess what was genuine. I finally managed to speak, still breathless from the shock. Lainey, what are you talking about? She didn't answer directly. Please. Just, can you meet me? I know I'm the last person who should be asking, but this isn't about us. I think something's wrong. With him. Granger. I asked, wiping the foam from my mouth with the back of my sleeve. Yes, she whispered. I went back to the office tonight to get some of my things. I thought he'd left for the weekend. But I found something. Something he left. I didn't ask what. I didn't ask why she thought I should be the one she called. I didn't even ask why she sounded so certain that it was serious. Because deep down, a familiar part of me, the part she'd hollowed out but never quite killed, still wanted to protect her. Still felt responsible, even when I knew I shouldn't. I agreed to meet. Against every scrap of common sense, every inch of pride, I said yes. We met at her office building 40 minutes later. I parked in the underground garage, which echoed with every footstep like a forgotten theater stage. The security lights flickered in a way that felt almost rehearsed, like the place wanted to play along with the sudden tension in my gut. Lainey stood by the elevator, arms wrapped around herself, not dressed for drama. No lipstick, no heels. Just an old hoodie and jeans. That alone unsettled me more than her voice on the call. She didn't say anything right away. She just motioned me into the elevator, pressed the button for the 17th floor, her firm's top level, and looked away from me as we rose in silence. When the doors opened, the office was completely dark. The receptionist's desk was empty. Most of the lights were off, except one glowing office in the back corner. His. I followed her past glass walls and sleek furniture, the soles of my sneakers silent on the polished floor. When we reached his door, she paused, looked at me, and whispered. He forgot to lock his computer. Lainey pushed open the door, and we stepped inside. I expected spreadsheets, emails, a calendar entry for another fake retreat. But instead, what I saw made my stomach churn. On the screen was a folder labeled Cloud Backup. Inside were dozens of subfolders, each one labeled by a woman's name. Some were current employees, some names I didn't recognize. One folder was just labeled Exit Package. She clicked it. Inside were files, images, emails, surveillance clips, notes. None of it illegal, at least not at first glance, but all of it deeply invasive. Personal. He had documented their lives with clinical precision. Where they went, who they spoke to, when they cried in the break room. This isn't just me, she said. He's been keeping records. On every woman he worked with. Not just for blackmail. It's something else. There was a video file labeled Laney_video entry 3.mov. She hovered the mouse over it, but didn't click. I didn't know, she said quietly. I swear to you, I didn't know who he was. I thought he was just intense. Over-involved. I thought I was flattered. I didn't see any of this. I stepped back from the desk, trying to process what I was seeing. I felt cold, unmoored, because suddenly this wasn't a story about infidelity anymore. This wasn't just about betrayal or marriage. This was danger. Lainey looked up at me. I know you have no reason to care, but I didn't know where else to go. You were the only person I thought might believe me, and not think I'm overreacting. And here's the strange part. I believed her. Completely. Not because I wanted to, but because in that moment, I saw her face not as my wife, or the woman who stopped loving me, but as a person standing on the same side of a line I hadn't known existed. We didn't stay long. I took pictures with my phone, just enough to make sure this didn't disappear if he found out. Lainey unplugged the monitor and closed the blinds. We left through the service exit. By the time I dropped her off at her apartment, it was almost 2 a.m. She didn't ask me to stay. I didn't offer. But just before she shut the door behind her, she said something I'll never forget. I think this whole time, I've been chasing someone who was watching me run. And then she closed the door, and I realized something else. This wasn't the end of our story. It was only the start of one I never wanted to be in. The next morning, I woke to a pounding headache and a phone full of questions. Kimber had called twice and texted once. Did you hear what happened at the firm? I hadn't. I'd barely slept. My mind was still running loops of last night. The folders, the video names, the look on Lainey's face when she realized she wasn't just one affair in a chain. She was a subject in someone's obsession. I called Kimber back. She picked up on the first ring, which immediately worried me. He's gone, she said. No hello, no small talk. What do you mean gone? I asked, sitting up too fast on the edge of the Airbnb bed. Granger. Disappeared. He didn't show up at the house this morning, didn't call the kids. His firm's panicking. 2 board members resigned overnight, and someone scrubbed his company bio. Something's going on, Wendell. Something big. I felt cold all over. Have you told anyone about what Lainey and I found? No, she said. But I'm starting to think we're not the only ones who know. We decided to meet that afternoon, neutral ground, a public place, just to be safe. I chose an art gallery in the old part of town. No one watches art lovers. No one suspects the guy staring too long at abstract oil paintings is planning anything. When Kimber arrived, she looked sharper than usual, not corporate sharp, but emotionally armored. She had a folder tucked under one arm and a determination in her step like a woman who'd been waiting years for permission to burn everything down. I did some digging last night, she said, guiding me to a quiet bench near the window. I accessed our old cloud backup, one I use for personal files. Turns out Granger had synced some of his folders to it by accident. There's a document, a list. Not just employees. Clients. Judges. Politicians. She handed me a printed page. My breath caught halfway down the list. Lainey's name was there. Mine wasn't. But right below her name was a second line. An annotation in small type that read, "Spouse unaware, docile, emotionally dependent, leverage not required." I stared at those words for a long time. Docile, emotionally dependent. I couldn't even argue. I had been those things. For so long. For so pathetically long. Kimber was watching me. He built his world on power imbalance. Every connection, every affair, every mentorship, it was all calculated. I used to think I was just the wife who got left behind. Turns out I was never even on the board. Why now? I asked, not to her, but to the world. Why would he vanish just as we're figuring it all out? Kimber gave me a long, deliberate look. Because I think he knew we were watching. And I think he's about to make a move. It sounded paranoid. But I wasn't laughing. That evening, I got a message from Laney. Laney, he called me. Twice. I didn't answer. Then he texted. Just one line. She forwarded it to me. Granger, I know what you saw. Come to the cabin. What cabin? I replied instantly. Laney, the place we stayed last spring. Outside of Ashbridge. The one I didn't know about. The one she'd claimed was a retreat for client culture building. That one. Don't go, I said, without hesitation. I wasn't planning to, she wrote back. But I think you should. It took me a moment to realize what she meant. Wendell, she added, he doesn't think you matter. That's your power now. I read that line 5 times before I closed my phone. By midnight, I was driving north through the back roads outside Ashbridge, headlights cutting through fog like I was heading straight into someone else's story. And maybe I was. Maybe this wasn't about me and Laney anymore. Maybe it never really was. It was about a man who thought he was untouchable. And the people he forgot were still watching. The road to the cabin felt like driving into a memory that didn't belong to me. Tall pines flanked the winding asphalt, the moon hanging like an unblinking eye over the forest. I kept the radio off. Every song felt too light, too false. The silence suited what was coming. By the time I reached the gravel drive, it was 1:14 a.m. The cabin was dark, no cars parked outside, no lights in the windows. But someone had been there recently. The porch lamp was still warm to the touch. I didn't walk to the door immediately. I circled the perimeter first, slow and quiet, half expecting to see Granger waiting in a chair with a scotch and a smirk, like some overconfident villain who thought his ending would go differently. But the place was empty. At least, that's how it looked. Inside, it smelled like cedar and dust. There was a fire pit in the center of the living room, cold and unused. On the table sat an open laptop, and next to it, a small, sealed manila envelope with one word written in bold black marker. Laney. I didn't touch it. I didn't have to. I looked at the laptop. It was unlocked. A single video file was open, timestamped just 2 hours earlier. The title read, For Them. I pressed play. Granger appeared on screen, shirt slightly unbuttoned, hair unkempt, a version of him I'd never seen before. Gone was the polished, smug executive. What stared back was a man unraveling in real time. I suppose this is the part where I explain everything, he began, voice hollow. But I don't think I have that in me anymore. I built an empire on control, on knowing more than everyone else in the room. And I kept building, kept watching, kept collecting. Not because I needed it, but because I could. Because no one ever told me no. He paused. And then someone did. A few of you, actually. He didn't name names. But I knew. He meant Kimber. He meant Laney. He meant me. Granger went on for another few minutes, a mixture of confession and defeat. Then the screen went black. No threats. No apologies. Just silence. When I turned off the laptop, I stood there in the stillness of that cabin, surrounded by shadows of someone else's secrets, and felt the first true breath in months expand inside my chest. He was gone. Not just from the firm, not just from the city, but from the myth he'd created around himself. And with that collapse, something else fell too. The weight I'd been dragging since the day I stopped being seen in my own marriage. I didn't call the police right away. Instead, I took the envelope marked for Laney and locked it in the glove compartment of my car. Whatever it held, she'd decide what to do with it. I wasn't her handler anymore. I was just a witness to the final act of a story that never really belonged to either of us. When I got back to the Airbnb, the sun was rising. The world felt different. Not fixed, but breathable. 2 days later, Kimber called. I'm filing for divorce, she said, clear and calm. And I'm going to the board with everything. I don't care who tries to cover it up. You won't be alone, I said. I know, she replied. And neither will you. Laney didn't call again that week. But she sent me a message, not a plea, not an excuse. Just a picture. It was the photo strip, the one from the pier, folded in half. She'd taped it back together. Below it, she wrote, "You deserved more than what I became. Thank you for giving me the mirror." I didn't reply. I didn't need to. Sometimes the closure isn't in the apology. It's in knowing you finally stopped begging for one. 3 months later, I signed my name on the lease to a small apartment above a bookstore. My new neighbor is a retired professor who makes too much soup and insists I borrow her books. I've said yes to everyone. Last week, I started therapy. I didn't think I needed it. I told myself I was past all that. But the truth is, healing isn't about getting over someone. It's about getting back to yourself. The version of you who once felt worthy, who laughed without flinching, who sat at the dinner table and wasn't afraid to speak first. And me? I'm getting closer to that guy again. Slowly, but I'm getting there. And this time, no one's going to forget I was in the room.